Welcome back to We Want Picks. I'm Artem in the May, and I'm going to be breaking down the PFL number 9 card for the 2024 season, which is now the semi-finals of the featherweights and also the welterweights, which should make for some pretty exciting fights in that main event. And as well as that, we actually have some pretty solid prelims this time around. In my opinion, prelims that are actually very difficult to predict, but I have done a bit of tape study on those, and hopefully I can get all of those all right as well. I think that there are going to be some very live underdogs on those prelims, so definitely stay tuned for that. I have been breaking down the PFL and also the Contender Series for We Want Picks, and I am going to be breaking down Contender Series for all 10 weeks, so definitely keep your eyes peeled for that. But of course, aside from that, there is the We Want Picks $10 per month premium membership service, which is all of Angelo and Jacob's bets for the UFC cards, and I cover everything that is not UFC on article format and also, of course, in video format as well. So that is $10 per month, but you can get a 3-day free trial if you do sign up using my code ARTEM. And with all that being said, let's now get into the predictions. So kicking off the card, we are going to have a fight at bantamweight between Marcirley Alves taking on Brahyan Zurcher. And it is a little bit of an interesting move for Zurcher, as he is going to be moving down to bantamweight for what I think is the first time in a while. Over the period of the time away from between the PFL seasons, he was taking catchweight fights at 150 pounds over in Lux FC, which is in Mexico, and got a couple of quick wins there, but he returned to 145 pounds against Julian Ruiz in the PFL. He is a guy that the PFL has been trying to build up for a while. I guess they're trying to build him up as the Mexican star, as they have been giving him, in my opinion, pretty good matchups. I did think that the Julian Ruiz matchup was a pretty good tailor-made matchup for him, and he put him out cold. He put him out very, very badly. But I think he's now going to be taking on his toughest test to date in Marcirley Alves, now coming down a weight class. Marcirley Alves is very small. I think that the weight difference, or even just the size difference in general, is going to be shown. Marcirley Alves is 5'4". He is quite small. He looked small against Jarrell Hodge when he fought there. He looked small against Savajan Kamadov when he fought there. But one thing that I can give him a lot of credit for is just being very, very fast. There's a couple of bantamweights on the Contender Series, Billy Brand and Cody Haddon, that are very small for bantamweight, but they make up for that lack of size with a lot of speed. And I think that Marcirley Alves is kind of a guy that is like that. He is a shooter box guy. He is a Muay Thai striker, and he is fast, man. I think that is actually a very big advantage that he's going to have going into this matchup here against Brahyan Zurcher, who I think on the feet actually has looked pretty slow in matchups. I have actually gone back, and I did watch these fights, which were just kind of him getting wins, you know, over on the regional scene, but I did watch them, and he did look pretty slow in those fights, albeit upper weight class. But now I'm thinking him coming down a weight class, he's going to have to cut 135 for, I think, the first time in a long time. And he's taking on a quick guy, a guy that I think is faster. Now, Zurcher could win this fight by using his wrestling, and I think that is how he's going to have to get it done. But I am going to go with Alves here. Now, I do understand that Alves did get out-wrestled by Savajan Kamadov, and that is how he lost the fight. But I think that the speed and the movement is kind of going to be everything here. Alves has very good cardio. He can push a pretty high pace for 15 minutes if he needs to. And I think that he is going to pull off the upset here. And I think it's going to be an upset because the PFL definitely wants Brahyan Zurcher to win. This is a very low confidence pick though. And he is a pretty sizable underdog. Not really. He's plus 150. But it seems like money might be coming in on him as he's plus 145 on DraftKings. But I am going to go with Alves here. It is a very low confidence pick. He is an underdog in PFL. And you guys know me. I don't typically pick that many underdogs in the PFL. But I am going to be going with Alves to win this matchup. And now we have Eric Alequin returning after a little bit of time away to take on Luca Poclit in what kind of is a little bit of a mirror matchup. It is Alequin, who is a grappler, who actually fought for the PFL against Thad Gene, lost to Thad Gene by, well, Thad Gene just being the much better striker, and now he's back, taking on another grappler in Luca Poclit, who has a judo background and is a very good submission artist and has actually been in Bellator for a while now, and he's looked pretty good. He actually had that Lucinator choke, I believe it's pronounced, the first and only one in Bellator history, and then he beat Roman Feraldo, who was a pretty hyped up prospect for quite a while, and got a very good win over him. He was out-wrestled quite a lot by Logan Storley, and Storley just won that fight by dominating in the wrestling, but it is somewhat expected as Storley is a pretty decent wrestler. Poclit is a judo guy, he's a grappling guy, his boxing kind of doesn't really exist, like it does, because he does throw volume, but for the most part his chin is up in the air, and he is just throwing straight shots. Eric Alequin, on the other hand, I kind of had mixed opinions about. Yes, he got beaten up by Thad Jean on the feet, but he isn't, like, really, like he's not as aggressive as Luca Poclit. Like, he does have wrestling. His pure wrestling might potentially be better than Poclit's, but I wasn't too impressed by him. He did get hurt a lot by this opponent here, Hugh Pulley, in his fight, which was a couple of years ago now, on Cage Fury FC, and before that, he was submitting somewhat decent opponents for Combati. I do think that Luca Poclit actually is the better grappler in this grappler versus grappler matchup, and that is why I am going to pick him to defeat Eric Alequin here. But there is some unknowns. Alequin hasn't fought for 18 months. Maybe he's taken time off and really improved in that period of time. We just saw Luca Poclit kind of get lost a dominant decision to Storley only, a few months ago, couple months ago now, and that's really his first loss in a very long time. So it'll be interesting to see how he rebounds from there. But I do think it is just a grappler versus grappler fight, and I am going to be picking in my opinion, the better grappler, which is Luca Poclit, and he is very wide. He's minus 300 money line. Interesting. Not a lot of respect given to Alequin there by the Tapology voters either. Jesse Stirn will be fighting against Jose Perez, and this is a fight which I actually agree with the odds and disagree with the Tapology voters, because it seems like the majority are going with Jesse Stirn, whereas I am actually going to pick Jose Perez in this matchup. Jose Perez is actually a pretty solid prospect for featherweight. He actually was rumored to be on the Contender Series this year, but then the PFL ended up signing him, and here he is going to be making his PFL debut. In my opinion, Jose Perez is the better striker out of the two. Jesse Stirn is definitely a wrestler, and that's kind of it. I haven't necessarily been too impressed by any of his striking necessarily, but he does kind of have a fun style to watch, because if you do watch him fight, like even on the feet, if he's losing on the feet, he's just smiling at his opponents, and he's done that since 2021, because I did go back quite a bit and watch a lot of his fights on the PFL YouTube channel, which were very easy to find, and I was able to find a couple of his fights recently on UFC Fight Pass as well. He had a very interesting fight against Vladimir Kazbekov here, because Kazbekov was actually able to out-wrestle him quite a bit, but Stirn's just pure grappling was better, and that's what was able to get him the win there. He did recently win over Josh Blyden by winning all 3 rounds on, I believe, one of the judges' scorecards, and a couple scorecards have 2 rounds to 1. But nonetheless, Stirn is a grappler, and I just don't think that his striking is all that good. I did watch his fight against Shaman Moraes, and Shaman Moraes outlanded him, I think, like 40-5 in the strikes. It wasn't even close and that one there. But Jose Perez isn't a striker either, even though I do think he is going to be the better and more comfortable striker in the matchup. Jose Perez has looked pretty good. He's been fighting for Cage Fury FC recently, and I believe he became the champion over Chris Vasil in what was a pretty decent win for him there. He was able to showcase all of his wrestling and a bit of his grappling as well. I think he can out-grapple Jesse Stirn here. I think he can outstrike Jesse Stirn. It is a very low confidence pick, and Perez is like minus 200, which I think is pretty wide, and if you really do think about it, I would just kind of consider this fight as a little bit more of a Contender Series sort of style of a matchup. It's going to be a test for both guys. I think it is closer than a minus 200 line, but I am going to go with Perez here. I think he is the better striker. I think he's definitely more comfortable and definitely more high volume on the feet, but I think in the wrestling and the grappling, it could be quite interesting. So the pick is Perez, even though the majority are on Stirn. And now we have Tyler Diamond fighting against Enrique Barzola. Tyler Diamond has been, well, he's been a diamond for me, because I have picked him as an underdog 2 times in a row now, and he has won both times, but the odds makers are now getting on him a little bit now, and he is no longer the underdog in this matchup. Actually, the odds are dead even. I believe Tyler Diamond is now the slight favorite, minus 120, and Enrique Barzola is minus 110. But Tyler Diamond, you could have got him, I believe, at plus 145 against Brick Johns and plus 155 against Otto Rodriguez, and if you did get that, you won as an underdog 2 times, so that was pretty good. He's fighting against Enrique Barzola, who is actually a former bantamweight at Bellator. Then he come over to the PFL, and the PFL doesn't have a bantamweight division, so he was kind of forced to move up to 145 pounds, and it hasn't really looked all that good for him so far. He did lose to Adam Boric, who is a pretty decent guy, to be honest, pretty decent striker, and he lost to Timur Khizriev, who I think is actually going to win the whole thing, just to spoil my pick for later on in the night. But I do think that Enrique Barzola does have pretty decent skills. He's got a very, very weird striking style where his hands are either very low or very high, and it just works. It just works. But aside from that, he is a pretty solid grappler. Tyler Diamond really mostly is a wrestler, and that kind of is how I do consider his style, is very much a pure wrestling style. He has been able to win his last couple of fights just by being the bigger opponent. He did that to beat Otto Rodriguez, and he did that to beat Brett Johns as well, who was also a former bantamweight. And I do think for those reasons, I actually think that Tyler Diamond can go out there and defeat Enrique Barzola here. And what is it going to be? A very closely contested matchup, no doubt. But another thing about Tyler Diamond is I feel like finally, for kind of the first time in his career, he's able to be active. This is going to be his third fight in about 4 months. And before that, he was taking very long periods of times off in between fights due to injury or other commitments as well. So Diamond kind of is a little bit of, in my opinion, a little bit of a what if, because he was on the Ultimate Fighter quite a few years ago, I believe the Ultimate Fighter Undefeated season, and even though he lost a close decision to Bryce Mitchell, he ultimately wasn't signed to the promotion. So maybe Tyler Diamond could have gone and done something in the UFC, we don't know, but I do think he can defeat Enrique Barzola by decision here, using his wrestling, top control, and ground and pound, which is all pretty solid. Now, Ray Cooper III fights against Mukhamed Berkhamov, and this is not a Mukhamed Berkhamov pick. This is a Ray Cooper III fade. And this is going to sound a little bit insane, but at plus 300, I think Ray Cooper III is actually an underdog worth keeping an eye on. And Mukhamed Berkhamov at minus 450 is not a guy I would be putting in your parlays. Mukhamed Berkhamov has come over to Bellator and now obviously the PFL, and I think he hasn't actually looked all that good. He looked a lot better when he was fighting for ACB, for ACA over there in Russia. He got signed to Bellator. Jaleel Willis drops him on the feet, and he eventually kind of reverses the position from on top and gets the guillotine. He was actually beating Lorenz Larkin with his wrestling, and then he got elbowed to the back of the head, so that fight got called off. But then against Lorenz Larkin, he striked with Lorenz Larkin for that minute and 41 that it lasted, and in the clinch, Lorenz Larkin hit him with the perfect elbow, and that was just a walk-off KO where Berkhamov was slumped face first into the canvas. And watching Mukhamed Berkhamov's fights, he has a very, very interesting striking style, because he is honestly walking around in front of his opponents with his hands up like this, above his head. You know, like a lot of traditional kind of defense for MMA, you know, can be by the chin. You see that quite a lot. Sometimes you see it a little bit lower, so the hands can drop quickly for defending takedowns or coming up and defending body kicks and shots like that. Mukhamed Berkhamov doesn't have the traditional defense. It is up like this. It doesn't make sense to me. And when he strikes, his chin's up in the air and he is wide open for counter strikes. And Ray Cooper III could potentially be that guy to capitalize on that, because although he has looked, in my opinion, pretty poor recently, he still is a guy that does possess an insane amount of power. He had a great run in 2021. He actually won the $1 million by defeating Magomed Kiramov in a comeback KO win. Before that, I think Rory McDonald's retirement fight was against him, and he did, well, it looked pretty good, ultimately, is how he went. But then it kind of all fell apart in 2022. He missed weight very significantly against Carlos Leal, and then he fought against Brett Cooper at 170 pounds, made the weight, but then missed it again. And then he missed weight against Derek Brunson at 185 pounds. And then he lost to Jason Jackson, who was the champion, but at Bellator. Not anymore, actually. But nonetheless, Ray Cooper III, he's just kind of been all over the place since he won the $1 million. He's been missing weight, you know, fights haven't really been cancelled, but Yeah, he just hasn't looked the same, but he does possess power and he is a pretty good boxer with good defensive wrestling, which we have seen before. But he is on a little bit of a poor sort of form, and I think that Mukhamed Berkhamov can out-wrestle him. There is going to be a size advantage here. Ray Cooper III is 5'7". He's not the biggest guy in the world, and I think that Berkhamov can out-wrestle him and just kind of grind away a decision in that way. Berkhamov does have a lot of submissions, but it's kind of interesting because watching his fights, he doesn't necessarily have like a very submission hungry sort of style, if that makes sense. But I think Berkhamov can win, but I do just want to let you guys know I'm not that confident in it because I don't like Berkhamov's striking defense. He got KO'd badly by Loughnane and dropped by Jaleel Willis. And I know that these fights were a while ago. There's still the red flags are there. And Berkhamov is the pick though. I think he does win. I think he can out-wrestle Ray Cooper III. It's more of a Cooper III fade than anything. He just hasn't looked the same since 2021, really. And now we can move up to the main card. These are the guys now that are fighting in the semi-finals, and if they win this fight, they will now be in the finals to then win that $1 million prize. Gabriel Alves Braga will be fighting against Timur Khizriev. I am going to be picking Timur Khizriev, as I did hint at a little bit earlier in the video. And in fact, I actually do think that at the moment, Timur Khizriev is actually my pick to win the whole tournament and win the $1 million. Gabriel Alves Braga is only a striker. That's all he's really got. He's only got Muay Thai. And I did worry about his takedown defense a lot. If you do watch his fight against Chris Wade actually did manage to find a lot of success in the wrestling, especially in the second round, and Gabriel Alves Braga did kind of struggle to defend the takedowns there. He lost in the finals, but then after that, took on the chain wrestler Justin Gonzalez and was able to just smoke him on the feet, defended the takedowns, knocked him out. Very good win there. And then takes on Bubba Jenkins, who is also a very good wrestler and ends up winning by TKO, but he did look very good and he did look improved. Now, I believe that was actually a weight miss on the Braga side, and hopefully he can sort that out on this one here because now he's coming into the semi-finals and he really needs to make that weight. Timur Khizriev fights kind of exactly like you would expect him to. He doesn't really have much on the feet, but he is a very dominant wrestler, and that's how he wins. He is pretty boring, and his fights aren't that fun to watch because he does just dominate in top control and wins a decision. You know, he just hasn't really got that many finishes, does he? But yeah, he's on what, a 5-fight decision streak now. He's out-wrestled decent grapplers before. Alves Braga is going to be a much, much better striker in this matchup. I do want to kind of make that be known. But he does have decent takedowns, but I just don't takedown defense. But I just don't think that the takedown defense is actually going to be good enough to defend the takedowns of Timur Khizriev, who just is a very good wrestler. So that is the pick. I am picking Timur Khizriev to win by decision. I think he's a pretty sizable favorite. He's minus 450, minus 500. Braga's always going to have a chance being the better striker, but I think Khizriev is, of course, the pick. And now we have a very odd rematch because this is just the way that the PFL's sort of structure works and why I do somewhat disagree with the point scoring system. I feel like there is different ways that they could make it work, but Shamil Musaev and Murad Ramazanov fought against each other 6 weeks ago. 7 weeks, maybe 7 or 8 weeks ago, but a couple of months ago, nonetheless. And Shamil Musaev won that fight pretty clearly and knocked out Murad Ramazanov. Now, I will put my hand up and say I did pick Murad Ramazanov to win that fight because I genuinely didn't believe that Shamil Musaev's takedown defense was as good as it is. I now have learned. Shamil Musaev is the truth. He has very, very good takedown defense. He is the much better striker in the matchup. And Murad Ramazanov was knocked out 2 months ago and will probably just get knocked out again. It's the same matchup that we just saw a couple of months ago, except now one guy has significant momentum coming into the matchup, and one guy is coming off a KO loss. So, kind of just putting 2 and 2 together, and I know this is just MMA math. I think you can just kind of pick Shamil Musaev to win by knockout again. The better striker, with no doubt, is Shamil Musaev. Now, the way that he could potentially lose this fight is by getting too over-aggressive, which we have seen happen many times in his career prior to the PFL. Because against Mikhail Petrozak, I mean, he actually started a fight after this fight. It was kind of nuts, but He has been caught getting way too aggressive in the past. In the past as well, he has thrown a lot of kicks which have been caught, and he has been taken down in that way. But it kind of seems like he's just improved all around as a striker. He's not really so kick heavy anymore. He's not so over aggressive anymore. And I do think that he can once again take on the same guy that he knocked out 2 months ago, defend the takedowns and knock him out on the feet. Seems like that theory has kind of held true for the Tapology votes, and it has held pretty true for the odds as well. Shamil Musaev is now minus 275, minus 250 on DraftKings, and I actually think he does just get another knockout win. And now we can move up to a fight with absolutely ridiculous odds with Magomed Umalatov, fighting against Neiman Gracie. And the odds for this fight, Magomed Umalatov minus 2,500, Neiman Gracie plus 800 on DraftKings. Magomed Umalatov is minus 1,200. Neiman Gracie is plus 750. Magomed Umalatov is a absolutely gigantic favorite, probably one of the bigger favorites in MMA history. This is nuts because I do think he wins, though. I'm going to say, I do think he wins. I mean, Magomed Umalatov is a fighter that has actually developed a lot in the well-roundedness of his game recently. He started out as a striker in his career and had very, very good striking, but then he fought Naib Lopez and then just out of nowhere really started adding wrestling into his game. He out-wrestled Naib Lopez for that fight. He out-wrestled Naib Koreshkov in that fight. And then he obviously beat Brendan Roard. But Magomed Umalatov is a guy that was a striker. And then he developed wrestling into his game. I think in this matchup against Neiman Gracie, you can kind of guess what Neiman Gracie is good at and what he's not good at. He should just strike, because he is a decent striker with very good wrestling as well. I think if he just avoids the wrestling, he's the better striker in this fight against Neiman Gracie. And he probably could take down Gracie with ease and avoid submissions, but I think that is not the path of least resistance. Neiman Gracie has accepted this fight on short notice. Umalatov was meant to fight against Don Madge. Neiman Gracie lost to Goiti Yamauchi, who was a fighter I'm a big fan of, and then did get the win over Don Madge a few weeks ago. Neiman Gracie, he's just not as good at striking, really. Like, that's kind of just what it comes down to. Yes, he's good at grappling. His wrestling's alright, but he doesn't shoot for takedowns as much as you would expect to. And I do just think that Magomed Umalatov's going to win by knockout. Do I agree with the odds of him being minus 2,500? No, not at all. I mean, these are insane odds, but I do just think that Umalatov is the better striker. I think he can keep the fight on the feet, and I am going to pick Umalatov to win by knockout. And now the main event is Brendan Loughnane fighting against Kamaka III. And I have been somewhat critical of Brendan Loughnane in the past. I thought that he did have a pretty sad season last year, but he has come back, and he has come back to a lot of success. You know, he did fight in 2023 against Marlon Moraes. Yes, he won the fight in the second round, but he didn't look very good in the first round. And then he got knocked out by Jesus Pinedo in the next matchup. And Jesus Pinedo actually ended up moving up and winning the whole $1 million tournament, and hasn't really fought since. So interesting to kind of see what happens with him. But Brendan Loughnane has looked good. He defeated Justin Gonzalez, who is a chain wrestler, and he knocked out Pedro Carvalho in 90 seconds. Before that, he won the whole $1 million tournament. He looked good in 2022, defeated Bubba Jenkins, knocked him out in the fourth round, who's a good wrestler. Chris Wade is a good wrestler, definitely getting past his prime, but makes it happen. There is still some red flags, though. Like, I mean, Argo Huskic and Ryoji Kudo were able to give him some pretty tough matchups, but Brendan Loughnane is a good striker, and I think he has actually improved since that 2023 season, which I think must have had to have been a big wake-up call, because Brendan Loughnane was talking crazy. He was talking about how he's the best featherweight in the world, and he goes into the 2023 season, looks bad against Marlon Moraes in round 1, and then gets knocked out by Jesus Pinedo in less than 100 seconds. But since then, he's come back, and he's looking good. He's looking very good. He's a very solid, dynamic striker. He's going to want to keep the fight on the feet, and I think that Kai Kamaka will probably allow that to happen. Kai Kamaka III is actually a former UFC fighter who had a very up-and-down UFC career, mostly down, but, you know, you could argue that a lot of these decisions could have gone his way. You could even argue that this decision could have gone his way. But what he is he is a striker that has been in Bellator and has been on a very good win streak right now, defeating Bubba Jenkins as well, which is a solid win, and then Pedro Carvalho, who, well, I mean, both of these guys fought Pedro Carvalho this season. I do think Brendan Loughnane's the better striker, and I think he's the more powerful striker. So I think that he's just going to land more damage over the course of 3 rounds and win the matchup in that way. He might be able to land a KO blow on Kamaka, but Kamaka is a very tough guy. So I think that we're going to see Brendan Loughnane go out there and find a win by decision in the striking, landing more volume, landing the bigger shots. And that is the pick. Loughnane is -350. Kamaka the third is +275. Let me know what you think of this PFL card in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.